Sometime later. Sometime later is the way that John 5 begins. And that's where we find ourselves today. And with that phrase, we turn a corner in the Gospel of John. And as we do that, just to invest a couple of minutes while this takes place, we can check our spiritual bearings a little bit so that we're all moving along together in the same direction. A quick review of the first 4 chapters will allow us to be able to do that. In John chapter 1, in those opening verses where it's in the beginning it tells us Jesus is God, Jesus is life, and Jesus became a human being in God's great plan. At the end of chapter 1, verses 19 to 34, we saw John the Baptist and his ministry. 3 characteristics of a successful life: to know who you are, to know who you aren't, and to know who Jesus is. At the end of John 1, we saw those first disciples start following Jesus. Jesus approached them in a way that fit their individual personalities as he invited them to come and see, and they began to follow. In John 2, Jesus turned water into wine. It was a joyous miracle. It was witnessed by only 5 followers, his 5 followers and the household servants. If you want to see miracles, start serving. God will be in the midst of that service. At the end of John 2, Jesus cleaned out the temple. And we saw how, as temples of the Holy Spirit, that he can make our lives clean as well. John 3, we met Nicodemus and saw that searching for truth that was taking place. And then, of course, John 3:16, where God so loved the world, and he loves you and me. Finally, John 4, we saw the woman at the well, saw that interaction, and then last week, the healing of the royal official's son, as that great miracle of healing took place. We've been looking at how John gives us snapshots. It's as though, as a photographer, Todd, snapshots have been taken, and John very carefully selects these snapshots to go into the album. And now he's been very precise up to this point. He said 2 days later, 3 days later, and now it's sometime later. So I don't know if he got stuck where, maybe it was the old days, he couldn't have film, or maybe he opened the back of the camera too quickly. Anybody ever do that with film? Where you open the back of the camera too quickly and you expose the whole roll and then you never got the pictures. But it's now sometime later. And so after all of this has occurred, the corner is turned, and the corner that's turned here, there's growing rejection and hostility that we're going to see toward Jesus over these next few chapters. The opening verses of chapter 5, we have a snapshot where there's another healing that takes place. The healing in chapter 4 that Jeff covered last week was in the northern part of Israel. The healing of the man at the Pool of Bethesda takes place in Jerusalem in the southern part of the country. Up until this point, everything has been headed in an upward direction. It's been good. Jesus' popularity is growing. People are starting to accept and follow him. And now, sometime later, everything takes a turn, and hatred and persecution that's going to lead to the arrest of Jesus and his crucifixion, it starts dominating those snapshots that John puts into his album. That's going to be the storyline in chapters 5 to 11, opposition intensifying. 3 miracles that really are the cornerstones of this. Here in chapter 5, Jesus heals the man beside the pool. In chapter 9, Jesus is going to heal the man who was born blind. And then in chapter 11, Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. You could make attempts to deny or discredit the first 2 miracles. There wasn't any way to deny that Lazarus was no longer dead. And that one pushed them all the way around the corner and off the ledge, to mix my metaphors, as they decided the only solution they had was to kill Jesus. That's enough by way of setting context. We find here people at a strange place beside a pool. There's an allure, an attraction that people have with places or items that are thought to be holy. I know 2 of the stranger items I've seen over the years included, there was a place, a garage, where a shadow would form at a certain time of day. It would form in the shape of a cross. And somebody took a picture of that and put it out, and soon people were making a pilgrimage to go to this garage to be able to pray. The other was a tortilla that, after being fried, appeared to have the face of Jesus imprinted on it. And so they sought to make a holy shrine out of this tortilla. And the shrine again spread. People traveled and they were praying in front of this holy tortilla, is what they did. Divine power, they thought, was being available. There's a special place in France named Lourdes. I don't know if any of you have ever been here. It's a place where a 14-year-old girl claims that she saw the Virgin Mary in a cave in 1858. And so over the years, people have traveled here, made pilgrimages to this place, believing there is special healing power that is available. In fact, in 2018, the 70th miracle that dated back to 2008 was officially recognized as having taken place. Now, my purpose here is not to discuss, debate, or even seek to debunk the validity of these miracles. What we're able to see is how Jesus comes to such a place today where there are desperate people who are waiting and they are hoping for a miracle. I know as the students sang the songs today, I was amazed at how they fit so well with what's involved in this passage today. Let's see if we can picture the scene as Jesus goes up to Jerusalem. Jerusalem, a typical city surrounded by walls, and there's a little depiction on the screen there for you. One prominent feature is the Temple Mound on which the temple stands. Just to help you picture that, we're going to let this stage be the Temple Mound today. And on the Temple Mound, there was the temple, and we're going to let the drum stand be the temple. The most holy place is the drum stand. Right there. The rest of the city with all the houses and Herod's palace and all that, that's out where you people are sitting. Now, the account in John 5 takes place at the Pool of Bethesda. The pool was to the north, and north is that direction here, of the Temple Mount. And so when we do baptisms in here, we set the baptistry pool right over here. So if you can imagine the baptistry pool right over here on this part of the stage to the northwest of the temple, we'll let that be the Pool of Bethesda, just so you can picture this. And then there is the sheep gate. And so we can make the little spot here where it goes off and out that door. That can be the sheep gate, and that's where they would bring the sheep in that were going to be offered as sacrifices. And hopefully we'll be able to see it was all in a rather confined space where this took place, as a couple of million people would come into Jerusalem for these festivals. With that, let me read the passage. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie: the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned he'd been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. So 38 years. Think about that. 38 years ago, it was 1984. In 38 years, it will be 2060. He has been waiting and hoping and waiting for healing for 38 years. Helpless for 38 years. He is a picture of what happens in our lives. In all of their lives, there are times when this sense of helplessness just seems to invade and we can't escape it. It may be a relationship issue. It could be a financial crisis. It could be a destructive habit. It could even be a prayer that you've prayed over and over and over again with no answer. And it doesn't take much for helplessness to sink into hopelessness. How on earth could this man have been able to escape hopelessness. How many years would you last? How many years would you last? We know God isn't limited or bound by time. We know that. We just don't necessarily comprehend or understand that truth. And so as Jesus stands over this man, Jesus is giving us a place to look when we feel like problems are never going to go away, even though I have prayed. And so let's look at this man. When it says he's been sick for 38 years, it doesn't mean he's been lying here beside this pool each and every day for 38 years. I know I have all kinds of questions. You know, if he doesn't get into the water quickly enough, why doesn't he just go lie on the edge and then have something like kind of kick him into the water when water's stirred, you know, or just maybe roll over and fall in? It didn't work that way. He has been sick. And there has been this special time during the festival when hope began to vibrate in his soul each year. Some manuscripts contained what is thought to be a later addition to explain why he was lying there. It's likely your Bible has the extended verse 3 in a footnote explaining how they believed that an angel stirred the water. And when that happened, it was thought the first person into the pool, that person would be healed. Now, when you're paralyzed, there's not much chance of being the first one anywhere, much less into a pool. And so if you're wondering whether or not people were actually healed or what caused the water to be agitated, I'm leaving that for your personal investigation. What matters for this man is that he believed it was true, and he has always been late making it into the water. He's helpless, and he is hopeless. For this man, it's the question that Jesus asked that really matters. Do you want to get well? Seems like a ridiculous question. The answer seems obvious. He's been there 38 years in a row. That's more years than the average lifespan at that time. And so Jesus offers a chance for change. What did that involve? Well, the first action is that Jesus sees the man. He sees the man lying there. Out of all the people, Jesus sees him. While on earth, one of the ways Jesus was limited is he needed to deal with people one-on-one. Jesus didn't gather people into large groups where he had fantastic healing meetings. The fact that Jesus focused in on this one desperate, hopeless person, it encourages me and it gives me hope because Jesus sees those individual needs. And Jesus, the second action, he knows his condition. The verse says that Jesus learned this man had been in this condition for a long time. Now, whether he understood this spiritually as something revealed to him by the Spirit or someone shared it with him, Jesus knows what this man is facing. He sees and he knows his condition, and he sees and he knows your condition, our conditions as well. The great thing about Jesus is that when he looks at you, he doesn't say, "Wow, I'm just as confused as you are. I'm not sure what, if anything, can even be done." Jesus knows why we are going through what we are going through, and he knows why we are hurting, and he knows what will make a difference. We need to latch on to that about Jesus. And so the third action, Jesus asks the question and he offers a chance. Again, it seems to be a strange question. Do you want to get well? It opens the door to the possibility of healing. And it gives us the opportunity to consider our own conditions if we can join that man lying on the mat as Jesus talks to him. There are those times, it seems, when we don't really want to get well. We know what that may require. We're not ready to pay the price. We identify with where we are, and it starts defining us sometimes. I might want to be different, but I'm afraid of the unknown. We become tied to our condition. It's part of our identity. For this man, it would be, well, you know who I'm talking about. He's the guy who's lying there on the mat down by the pool. He's the one who's never quick enough to get into the water first. It's his identity. His condition has become his identity. And so as Jesus picks this one man out of possibly, the commentaries say, thousands who may have been there, invite Jesus to ask his question of you as well. Do you want to get well? Jesus pinpoints the one factor preventing him from changing. Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me get into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. The process has been the same each year. The water stirs, someone always gets there first. I have no help. So the one barrier standing in his way is he has a specific solution in mind. I need someone to help me. And if I can read his mind at that moment as he looks up at this man who grew up in the carpenter shop, by the way, you look pretty fit and strong. Maybe you can help me get into the pool first. We can come up short and even miss completely what Jesus wants to do because we have a solution that we think he should do for us. It's a solution that's never going to work, but we keep trying anyway. This man thinks, I've got to be quicker or have someone to help me be quicker. And so healing here has been turned into a competition where the fastest, most able person is the one who's going to be healed. It's a matter of competition rather than compassion. The quickest, most able person may have been naturally healed anyway. Can you imagine the bitterness that would have caused as he watches year after year, person after person, beat him into the water, realizing that he never stood a chance? Another incident that took place where it was thought to be a holy place, a woman up on a mountain saw what she said was a virgin wearing a golden crown in the sun. And so another woman named Kathy, she heard about this phenomenon, and she decided to take her 2-year-old son, who was physically and mentally challenged, to that place so that they would be there when this image of Mary appeared in the sun. There were claims that people were being healed, and so she stared continuously at the sun, waiting for the image that never appeared. After a while, she began having trouble with her vision. A doctor told her she had permanently burned her retinas by staring at the sun for so long that she had damaged her vision. She concluded, I go up there to pray with one disabled member of my family and come back with 2. I'm done praying and I'm angry with God. You have to feel sorry for God. She was looking for a solution that had nothing to do with God, and when her solution doesn't work, she blames God. The man at the pool may have been feeling much the same way. Jesus, the God of the universe, is now standing before him, and all he needs to do is answer yes to Jesus' question, but he only sees Jesus as a possible way to win the race into the water. I have to admit, I've had those times where I have the solution figured out. I know what God is going to do. I know how he is going to do it. You may have been there as well. Then when it doesn't happen, you're tempted to blame who? God. I hope none of you have ever done that. It is a miserable way to live. In the struggle for our solution, what we do is we end up gathered around this pool, a pool of misery. We even grow comfortable at the pool. There can be good fellowship around the pool of misery as we share our stories with one another and are able to, well, if you think you've got it bad, let me tell you what happened with me. We know our place. People understand you at the pool of misery. They understand pain. They even accept you into that club. There will be a place where you can lay down your mat at the pool of misery. Jesus walks into that man's world, and he makes the most incredible offer that will activate change in his life. Jesus doesn't offer to help get him into the pool. Jesus doesn't encourage him. Keep it up. Someday you'll make it. Just give it your best. He doesn't try to make him more comfortable. Here's a pillow that you can lie on while you're there on your mat. He doesn't even argue about whether or not there's really an angel that's working in the pool instead of a natural spring that's just releasing some bubbles. He doesn't do any of that. Jesus said to him, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. It is a short, power-packed message. 3 instructions. Get up, pick up your mat, walk. How does God produce change when we feel helpless to change? And there are those places where we do feel helpless sometimes. It may be change in a relationship that is going really tough. It may be changing someone's mind. It may be a change in my physical condition, a change in finances. It might be a change in work conditions. Jesus comes to us as helpless people, just as he did to this man, with 3 instructions. The first instruction is get up. He challenges us to do the very thing we think we can't do. God says this is where you start. This man faced what he thought was an impossible obstacle to get into the pool. Jesus presents an entirely different option. And through the example of the royal official last week, seeking to help his son who was ill, we saw how we can come to God saying, here's how I would like you to do this for me. And God countered saying, that's not the way it's going to work. Do this instead. That was last week's passage. This week we find out that when we feel helpless, we feel like we can't, even when it feels impossible, Jesus challenges us to do that very thing. We see that happening in the Scripture. Abraham thought it was going to be impossible to be able to have a child. God said that he and Sarah would have a child. They had to do something to make that happen. Gideon thought it was impossible to feed a much larger and stronger army. God said it could be done, but that Gideon first needed to make sure his army was even smaller so they would know that it was God who gave the victory. Something happens in those moments. This man, he stopped relying on the water and the stories and even his own strength one day to be able maybe to make it happen. He came to the end of himself. And he trusted Jesus. That second instruction, take up your mat. He removes the temptation to relax and stay put. Here's how it worked at the pool. You arrive early, you find that good place. And maybe for 38 years, he's come back to the same place. And people began to know, well, this is his place. Make sure you leave that place. This is where he goes. He's going to put his mat down. He's never going to make it into the water, but he's going to have a good place to watch everybody else make it into the water. But no matter what, the mat stays in place. It's like going to Disney. You get in line for your favorite ride. What's your favorite ride at Disney? Are you there in line? The wait time, it says, is over 3 hours. After waiting 2 hours, finally, you've come around one of those places and you wonder how much longer you can go. And the ride's I can actually see where you go into the place where you get on the ride. And someone comes up and says, if you'll come with me, I can get you on the ride right now. Are you going to go? Are you going to go? The idea of not having to wait any longer is appealing, but what if it's all a joke and they're punking you and you lose your place in line? Jesus asked this man, pick up the mat. Give up your prime treasured spot. Lying on the mat hasn't worked for 38 years, but this is another year, another chance. Maybe this year. Jesus is asking him to trust and give up the comfort of his own solution. When God works in areas of our lives where we feel helpless, He calls us many times to give up the easy way back. When we've struggled in an area for a long time and we're trying to establish new habits, if we leave a crack in the door to go back, we're going to be tempted to push that door all the way open. It doesn't really matter what the area is. It might be a relationship that's tempting for you. It could be overspending or overeating, whatever it might be. There are changes that you're going to need to make to follow through. You know, if you're tempted to overeat because you love baked goods, it's not going to be a good idea to live over a bakery. You may need to pick up your mat and make a move someplace else. Third instruction is to walk, because Jesus provides what we need. Sovereignly, providentially, Jesus provides what we need. This is a big change for this man. In an instant, he is going from decades of not being able to walk to walking. When Jesus asks us to do something, he provides what we need to do it. Jesus doesn't put his arm around this man and say, well, you need to take a minute now. It's been like this for 38 years. You may just want to sit down and rest and get your legs under you for a moment. He says, no, walk. There's none of walk. And at once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and he walked. He didn't have to build up spiritual resources over time so that he'd be ready. We do that. We think faith involves building up our faith and becoming spiritually stronger, and so we keep building and building, and we never get around to walking. Sometimes we need to trust Jesus and start walking. This man walked. It's amazing what God can do when we turn our helplessness over to him. Now I wonder if he just calmly walked away like taking a Sunday afternoon stroll. Or was it more of a Super Bowl winning or maybe a game winning shot at the NCAA where everybody, yeah. That's what the man in Acts 3, he went walking and jumping and praising God after he'd been healed. I think it was probably a bit more like that. Just for some balance so I don't end up making it sound like God always works this same way. And then if you're not immediately healed, it's because there's something wrong with you and you don't have enough faith. There are times when God uses our faith in the middle of helpless circumstances to reach others. Abraham and Sarah waited 25 years for the promise of a son to be fulfilled. God uses examples of enduring, persevering faith to encourage us to trust for the long haul too. We need to be good with that. And I don't want this balancing point to lessen the miracle that happened when Jesus walked into this man's life. And he got up, he picked up his mat, and he walked, because the point is this. God is able to take the helpless situations and circumstances in your life. God is able to take those circumstances with which we live and change them. God can do that. If you're feeling helpless and you're headed toward hopeless, Jesus sees you. He knows you. And he has the resources. Here's the question that needs to be answered. Do you want to get well? Do you want to get well? As you've been listening, you know if there are places in your life where healing is needed. That's the way God's Spirit works. God's Spirit makes us aware so that we're ready to respond when we hear the voice of God, when we're called to get up, pick up our mat, and to walk. And so when we hear the word healing, our first thoughts will go naturally to physical healing. And I know there are people here in this congregation where we have been praying for their healing to take place. We need that healing. But there are also those places where we need healing emotionally, spiritually, financially, and relationally. Those kinds of places where we keep chasing our own solutions when Jesus is there to say, do you want to get well? Will you try my way? So in this moment, listen. Listen for where Jesus says to get up. He offers his help. You have to be ready to accept his solution by picking up your mat. That whatever you've been doing, it hasn't been working, and there's another way. Those changes to be made. There may be places or situations or people where you know that you are vulnerable and you need that help, and you just need to respond as Jesus stands over you to ask, do you want to get well? Let's pray. Just in a moment of silence, is there a place where you struggle, where you need that kind of help? You're there, and if you were that man, maybe suddenly, a shadow comes over you as you're lying on the mat. And you're wondering who's blocking the sun. And then you realize that it's the Son of God. And he's asking you, do you want to be well? Whatever that place might be, no matter how helpless it may be. It may be that you've struggled with it for year after year after year with no solution. Decades. 38 years. And you realize that through this snapshot that John provides in his gospel to help us believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that Jesus holds the solution. And you're ready to say, Jesus, I'm ready to do it your way. In whatever way you might lead, I give that to you today. And so Jesus, in those places where we may have found ourselves tied up in knots, and we've been taking classes on how to untie knots, we need to come to you. We wait upon you, and we thank you for the fact that you love us, that you have that ability to be able to change the circumstances in our lives. Even as the students sung today, God, we do look to you. You are mighty to save. And we trust in you for that kind of salvation. So take me as you find me. All my fears and failures, I give my life to follow today. Everything I believe in, I now surrender to you. Jesus, thank you that you will follow up and work in the lives of people. We give you praise for that in your mighty, mighty name. Amen. Finally, just to set a point of context as we look ahead to next week. John 5:9 tells us, at once the man was cured, he picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. We're going to see next week there are people who rain on the parade very quickly. We're going to be looking at the issue of legalism next week and how legalism versus grace, how legalism can just take and sap the joy of every bit of joy right out of life. And we're going to do that next week. In the meantime, have a great week as you serve. Continue to pray for the Anderson family that Linda would recover well and quickly. And if you know someone who works in public safety, or Christian school or public school, just tell them thank you for serving in the way that you do. God bless you this week.